Good morning, everybody. One of my favorite days of the year is the local roads CHIPS day that we have here. I want to thank all of our men and women in orange that are here joining us today from highway departments across the state who maintain our local roads, our local bridges, our local culverts day in and day out. And they do it with very slim budgets. Some do it with only the CHIPS money that they get from New York State. That's why CHIPS, having been flat for so many years, is a problem. It needs to be improved. We need to improve upon what Governor Hochul has put in her budget so far. Far more spending in a lot of areas with little attention to our local roads. It's a battle we fight every year. It's a battle that my good friend and colleague Phil Palmisano and I join together with every year to fight for this. I want to thank all of my colleagues in the Senate and in the Assembly for joining us here today. This is truly one of the better events, I think, that we have throughout the year. It will also be the only day in March that you'll see me wearing orange. You know, we have a lot of speakers today, so I want to just kick it off. I just want to thank everybody for being here, thank the media for being here, giving us attention on this vitally important issue to make sure that our local roads are well maintained, that they're safe, and the money spent on these projects also means jobs in our local communities. So it's important for many, many reasons, critically important. It's the base, really, of our economy, our transportation network. It's critically important. So with that, I will turn it over to Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'll turn it over to Leader Will Barkley. We got to wait for Phil. A minute. Will Barkley.
I don't know if anybody's cheering for me or happy that Phil's not coming to the podium, but either.
My little both.
Good morning, everyone. And, you know, as Senator O'Meara stated, this is really a great day of the year. And we deal with a lot of issues down here in Albany. But it's great to deal with an issue when you know you have the passion and support of all these people that are down here, because they know it's the right thing to do, and they know when they come down here and advocate for more funding for our local roads and bridges, that actually it does make a difference. Like Senator O'Meara, I want to thank our conference, the Republican Conference in the Assembly, the great partnership, of course, that we have with the Republicans in the state Senate. And I also want to thank both Tom O'Meara and, of course, the great Phil Palmisano for their advocacy on this issue. But most of all, as I said, I want to thank all the men and women in orange that are down here advocating for the right thing. As Tom mentioned, we do this dance once in a while in Albany where the governor does her budget. And unfortunately, as cost for roads and bridges has increased, I got a couple numbers here. I see fuel's up 260%. Asphalt is up 80%, steel up 115%, and then the governor comes out with flat spending in her budget. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. We do this dance. We have good revenue in the state this year. We ought to make sure that we have at least $200 million more going into our local roads and bridges. So thank you very much for being here. You got great advocates, as I said, with Phil and Tom. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to the great Assemblyman, Phil Palmisano.
Thank you, Leader Barkley. Thank you all for being here today for our year 11 for our annual local roads advocacy campaign. The main focus is to stress the importance of investing in our local infrastructure, our roads, bridges, and culverts. We've done this every year for 11 years. The last 2 years have been a little different with COVID, but we're back. I want to thank Leader Ord and Leader Barkley for their continued support in this. Certainly our colleagues behind us from the Senate and the Assembly, and of course my good friend Senator Tom O'Meara, who we've been trying to lead this charge with over the past 11 years. But a very special thank you to the individuals behind us in orange. Our highway superintendents. Thank you for what you do each and every day in our local communities to help our people and our taxpayers. Well, we want to say welcome back. It's been 3 years since you've been here, probably on this day 3 years ago. but we're thankful you're here. We're glad you're back, and we thank you for your advocacy. And I do want to stress the success we've had over the past 11 years is because of you, your advocacy, your dedication, your commitment, and the work you continue to do so effectively in our communities around the state. So we're here to advocate to strengthen our commitment to partnering with our local governments and investing in our local infrastructure, our roads, bridges, and culverts. And I will remind you that 87% of the roads in New York State and 52% of the 18,000 bridges in New York State are owned and maintained by our local municipalities. 48% of the miles driven are driven on our local roads. So I'll talk about our ask, and let me tell you, the ask is warranted, justified, and attainable. We have several asks, but the two most important asks is we're calling on the governor and our legislative colleagues to increase funding in the CHIPS base aid by $200 million to $738 million, and to increase the extreme winter recovery funding by $70 million to $170 million. As I said, this investment is warranted and justified because we have billions of dollars in unmet local needs, coupled with the unprecedented decay in our local highway system. And I will come back to some of the numbers a little later to explain and justify our ask. But at this time, I want to introduce some of our stakeholders who are here to advocate on the same mission with us, to talk about why this is important. So first, I'd like to introduce Kevin Rooney, the president of the New York State Association of County Highway Superintendents. Kevin?
Thank you, Assemblyman. This is awesome to see all these people here. I really appreciate it. The support from our highway superintendents, town superintendents, county superintendents, the people that are in the transportation industry, and all the legislators behind me. That's very, very impressive. I appreciate the orange. I've seen orange suspenders here tonight. That's awesome. So, again, a little bit about what this cost increases are doing to us. Construction inflation, certainly a big problem. Basically means we're going to do the same dollar amount of work. We're going to do less road work, though, this year. And that's huge. Every one of us has a program that we need to keep up. Our equipment, material suppliers, they have to keep up. So we know the costs are going to go up for every one of us. Delays in our highway and bridge programs, that means the project that might have been a simple rehabilitation this year becomes a reconstruction project at 2 or 3 times the cost in the next few years. Again, state funding needs to be increased to avoid these worst impacts on our already aging infrastructure. That's all I have.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce David Miller, president of the New York State Association of Town Superintendents of Highways. David.
Well, let me start off by saying it is great to be back here in Albany in person, and there's nothing than a better feel than to be back here and plead for our case here. So thank you for having us. It's great to see all the orange here. Like he said, I'm David Miller. I'm the highway superintendent for the town of Lockport in Niagara County, and I am the president of the New York State Association of Town Superintendents of Highways. I'm here today speaking on behalf of more than 900 highway departments represented by our association. I'm making an urgent appeal to the legislator to expand the state's commitment to local highways and bridges beyond what's included in the governor's executive proposal. Record high inflation of construction materials has reduced our buying power by 22%, which amounts to a disastrous cut in funding necessary to maintain safe roads. These are roads that you, me, our families are all traveling on every day. And this is not a us or they problem, this is an our problem. So we need another $270 million added to the governor's plan for local highway programs and CHIPS, and another 70 to extreme winter recovery, and just to hold our ground. As they said earlier, 87% of our roads are owned by us local towns and counties. So at that point, I'm just going to say thank you to everybody involved. This is a collaborative effort, and I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Next, I would like to introduce Michael Almendorf, president and CEO of the Associated General Contractors. Mike.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Assemblyman. Thank you all. Great to be here with so many friends and partners in the legislature and with the men and women across New York who work hand in hand with our members and our industry to do the work of rebuilding our roads and bridges. But as great as it is to be here, it's frustrating to be here because we should be here right now celebrating that finally we have the resources to bring roads and bridges across New York back to a state of good repair. The federal government gave us a singular opportunity with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and New York was one of the biggest beneficiaries. $4.6 billion more over the next 5 years, over that 5-year period to fix roads and bridges, a 52% increase. And what did New York do? We grew our capital plan by $2 billion. So when the federal government stepped forward with the biggest federal investment in roads and bridges since Dwight Eisenhower built the federal interstate system, the state of New York stepped back. They reduced their commitment to the capital plan by at least $2.6 billion. That's a big hit to the folks here because, you know, our local systems don't get those federal dollars, right? So we got to fix that. And then there's this other little thing that happened called inflation. Heard a little bit about that. It has taken a huge bite out of the capital program, and it has more than consumed the too modest increase that was in the capital plan adopted last year. So we're spending at 2015 levels. That's a level of spending that produced the worst decline in pavement conditions we've seen since we have data. And news alert, they're not doing another one of these big infrastructure bills in 5 years, right? If we blow this opportunity, we miss the boat. We can't let that happen. This is not a partisan issue. Republicans and Democrats agree. Republicans and Democrats got it done in Washington. The Democratic majority in the Senate last year advanced a $44 billion capital plan, which would have been a state of good repair number. It would have moved both local systems and the state system to a state of good repair. We can get that done this year. The resources are there. The support is there. The need is there. Let's get it done. Thank you all very much.
Next, I would like to introduce Ron Epstein, President and CEO of the New York Construction Materials Association. Ron?
Mike, do you want to drop the mic?
No, it's okay.
Okay. It's really tough to kind of follow what Mike just said because, we are at the precipice of, greatness. And yet here is Lucy taking the football away from Charlie Brown. So what I would like to say is, first of all, I'm Ron Epstein. I'm with the New York Construction Materials Association. I represent the women and men who produce the aggregates, the concrete, the asphalt that protect our families when they travel on the state roadways. The 5-year capital plan that was enacted last year really provided a strong foundation that we hadn't had. But as Mike said, and others have said, the inflation is all but a road of the progress that was made. So what we really need to do is turn our attention to what is really important. And what is really important is that New York has goals that they want to meet, whether we agree or disagree, but whether they be climate, whether they be, sustainability, whether they be economic development and growth, we need our local roadways because our local roadways are the front door to global trade and to making our businesses successful and bringing and attracting talent to work in New York. So we need to invest more in our local roads and bridges. I'm kind of skipping along here because Mike kind of took all the good details, but what I also want to do, I want to basically say that we need more funding for local roads and bridges. This didn't happen overnight. Over decades, we've allowed our assets to deteriorate to the point where we are among the worst road conditions in the nation, among the worst bridge conditions in the nation. So we need to do better. We need to do more. We need to progress so that we do remain competitive. The last thing I do want to urge you all today is that, a former state transportation official, I've gone to too many funerals where somebody was unfortunately killed in the line of duty. We need to pass legislation this year. There's a Part H in the TED bill that goes a long way, but we need to provide civil and criminal penalties for those who intentionally or are distracted and intrude into a work zone. We need to provide heightened penalties to ensure that no one else dies again in the line of duty. So please pass worker safety legislation this session. It's important. It's more important than anybody could ever realize. Thank you.
Right. Next, I would like to introduce Renee St. Jacques from the Associate Director for Public Policy at the New York Farm Bureau. Renee?
Good morning, everyone. Great to feel this positive energy in the room and to have everyone back here at the Capitol. Again, I'm Renee St. Jacques, part of New York Farm Bureau, which represents farmers from across the state. And those farmers use our roads and bridges to transport their farm products to rural and urban communities that you are all a part of. and also to travel from farm to field. And so it's vitally important that we have good infrastructure. We need a good, strong food supply chain, and in that we need reliable infrastructure. And for those reasons, New York Farm Bureau gladly supports the funding for the CHIPS program and any continued investment into our infrastructure. Really appreciate all the support from the legislators, and also thank you to everyone who works on the bridges and roads in our communities. We really appreciate all the work that you do, so thank you.
Thank you. I mentioned our colleagues, but I did want to point out my colleague Aileen Gunther from the Democratic Conference. This is I know she advocates for this issue, so we just wanted to say thank you for being here, Aileen, too, for your support. Again, and I'm going to talk about some statistics here, but again, we're here to enforce the urgency and the commitment to our local infrastructure. A lot of focus always talks about the MTA. We see signature projects like the Moynihan train station. We understand that the MTA is the lifeblood of the downstate transportation network. But we want to remind you that CHIPS is the lifeblood of our upstate transportation network, and sometimes it's the only funding that our local communities have for the local infrastructure. So some of the important data that you need to know. I think first, one important fact is the governor's budget proposal fails or does not recognize or understand the real impact of the 22% construction inflation rate. Leader Barkley mentioned some of the numbers from the New York State DOT from July 2020 to July 2022. The price adjustments have seen significant increases. Fuel costs up over 260%. Asphalt costs up over 80%. Steel costs up approximately 115%. This is significantly eating away at our local resources, which is why we have to strengthen and improve our partnership with the locals. The other fact is, even though the state is scheduled to receive billions of dollars in federal aid over the next 5 years, unfortunately, nearly 90% of the local roads are ineligible for that new funding, which is why it's even more critical here today and in this budget that the state partners with our local governments and provides increase in funding for our local roads, bridges, and culverts through the CHIPS program and winter recovery. Some other staggering numbers. The Comptroller's last report said that we had $89 billion in unmet local infrastructure needs over the next 2 decades. A 2017 report by the Comptroller said we have $27.4 billion in repairs that are needed on our local bridges only. We've seen the statistics showing that when we talk about our highways and bridges, paved conditions are getting worse and our roads are getting poor. And a recent analysis done by the New York State Town Highway Superintendent said that there's a funding gap of over $2 billion that need to be addressed. TRIP, the transportation advocate, said that roads and bridges deficiencies are declining, cost New York motorists $28 billion annually, more than $3,200 per driver due to the hazardous road conditions and impact that it has on our vehicles. Another important statistic to keep in mind, every dollar we invest in CHIPS is one less dollar that comes from the local property taxpayer. Our local property taxpayers deserve to have some of their dollars, tax dollars that they pay the state, to come back to their local communities to fix their local roads, bridges, and culverts. Every dollar invested in the CHIPS program saves $6 to $14 in long-term rehabilitation costs. And every $150 million increase in local infrastructure funding creates up to 4,200 more construction jobs. We need to be proactive for safety purposes. Last year when we were here, we were talking about a month before about the bridge collapse in Pittsburgh. How many of us put our kids on a school bus every day that goes over a local bridge or culvert? God forbid we have a tragedy like that and have to respond and be reactive instead of proactive. Our first responders go over our local roads, bridges, and culverts to get to emergencies. If there's a delay, lives could be in jeopardy. So we're calling on Governor Hochul and our colleagues in the legislature to be proactive this year, do the right thing, make this increased commitment to improve our local infrastructure and increase funding for CHIPS and the winter recovery program. This is attainable. Why? Number one, we have an $8.7 billion surplus this year. The governor has proposed a $280 million increase in the Hollywood film tax credit to $700 million. Surely, if we can increase funding to Hollywood Millions by $280 million, can't we increase funding to our local communities and property taxpayers by $270 million? We think we can and we think we should. And also, there is an economic uncertainty fund that the governor has proposed increasing funding to this fund by $7 billion this year to $13 billion. That's at the governor's discretion, and the legislature can act and use that fund to fund for important projects. So in conclusion, before I pass it over to my colleague, Senator O'Meara, to wrap up, I do want to say it's important to remember that our local roads don't just matter. Our local roads are essential. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Well said. Again, thank everybody for being here. Our leader in the Senate, Rob Ortt, had every intention of being here but couldn't get here this morning from Buffalo. I spoke with our chairman of the Transportation Committee, Tim Kennedy, on Friday. Was hoping he was going to be able to make it, but that long commute from Buffalo on an arrival day is quite a trek. So just want to say thank you to everybody. You know, a budget every year, as we say, is about priorities. And we've heard from Phil and from Mike and from others about some of the priorities that the governor has shown in her budget this year. This issue has not been one of them, and it needs to be one of them. We need to look at the areas where the governor is spending money. You know, some of these areas where the money is being spent is just so wrong in light of holding back and holding the funding for our local roads and the critical needs that they have. I mean, Mike Elmendorf nailed it with the federal resources that have been made available to New York State and the fact that they're not being passed through to our capital plan, either statewide DOT or to our local roads and bridges. And we need more. Everybody's here to demand that today. I thank you all for being here. And with that, we'll close it up and we'll ask some questions. And then I also want to ask everybody to stick around afterwards so we can get a photo with everybody when we wrap up. Are there any questions? I think the gap is far greater than that. You can talk to any one of these individuals. We're just, you know, trying to be reasonable, frankly, in the request. That's good. It was nice to have Eileen Gunther here this morning. I wish there were others, frankly. We need the bipartisan support, obviously, with the legislature makeup that we have right now. But Eileen has been a champion of this for years. She just told me this morning she lives next door to a highway superintendent, so we know we got her in our corner. You know, we're certainly working on that. Everybody has local roads in their district. Everybody.
Thanks, New York City.
Okay, thank you all very much.